Schools have evolved from traditional centers of rote education to places where holistic development is championed. While this change brings many positive outcomes, such as the development of critical thinking and social skills, it also introduces complexities. The values and norms your child absorbs are not solely dictated by your home environment. Schools now play a significant role in establishing what is deemed acceptable or admirable. The shift to include courses on mental health, gender identity, ethics, and even political awareness, while essential in promoting well-rounded individuals, can sometimes diverge from a family's core beliefs or understanding. Parents may find that their child's perspective on sensitive issues has shifted due to lessons or discussions held in school. This influence is not inherently negative. In fact, exposure to different viewpoints can enrich a child's ability to think independently. However, the challenge lies in ensuring that such teachings align with your values or are moderated with balanced insights from home. Monitoring is not about shielding children from new ideas, but rather ensuring that they receive context, guidance, and space to discuss what they learn. This approach enables children to engage with new perspectives thoughtfully rather than absorb them unquestioningly. The social landscape of school can feel like an ocean of shifting tides for young minds. Peer influence plays a significant role in shaping behaviors, preferences, and values. It is natural for children and teenagers to seek acceptance and affirmation from their peers, which can lead to positive or negative outcomes. A child's need to fit in may result in adopting behaviors they might not consider otherwise. From experimenting with new hobbies and slang to more serious issues such as substance use or skipping classes, peer influence is a powerful force. Parents who maintain open channels of communication and observe their child's social circle without overt judgment can better understand the motivations behind their child's actions. Conversations that begin with listening, rather than interrogating, encourage children to share more about their friends, challenges, and triumphs. This knowledge helps parents provide subtle guidance and support when needed, without pushing the child to secrecy or rebellion. Technology amplifies the effects of peer influence exponentially. Social media, group chats, and online communities extend school hours into a digital world where trends and interactions never cease. What may have been an isolated event in the past now spreads across platforms, affecting how children perceive themselves and their peers. The pressure to present a curated life, gain virtual approval, or stay relevant in an online social hierarchy can weigh heavily on young minds. Parents who understand these dynamics can foster discussions that highlight the difference between virtual and real-world validation. A parent who is attuned to the digital landscape and stays informed about the platforms their child uses is better equipped to guide them through potential pitfalls such as cyberbullying, unrealistic standards, and overexposure to inappropriate content. This proactive approach supports mental health and helps children develop healthy online habits. At the heart of school life are the adults who children look up to: teachers, coaches, and staff. Their influence extends beyond academics, subtly shaping beliefs and attitudes. While most educators have the best intentions, varying teaching philosophies and personal biases can come into play. For example, a teacher's method of introducing a controversial topic might align perfectly with some families' views but conflict with others. This makes it crucial for parents to engage with what is being taught in school and to have constructive dialogues at home. Children benefit from parents who take an interest in their studies, not just from the perspective of grades but as an opportunity to understand what resonates with them and why. This insight allows parents to reinforce or offer alternative viewpoints that enrich their child's critical thinking. When children know their parents are invested in their learning journey, they are more likely to open up about their classroom experiences. Extracurricular activities also contribute significantly to a child's development. Sports teams, drama clubs, debate societies, and volunteer groups introduce children to different social settings and leadership structures. These experiences help develop teamwork, discipline, and empathy but can also expose them to pressures and conflicts. Being aware of these activities and understanding the dynamics your child faces outside of academic classrooms is as important as monitoring their homework or test scores. The sense of identity and belonging that children develop through participation in various school activities contributes to their self-esteem and worldview. Parents who stay involved by attending games, performances, or meetings, and who actively listen when their child shares stories about their day, are more equipped to detect subtle changes in behavior that could indicate stress or discomfort. Addressing these shifts early helps build resilience and provides children with the confidence to face challenges head-on. While it's tempting to believe that children will naturally share details about their school life, the reality is often different. Between long school hours, extracurricular commitments, and the digital world, many aspects of a child's day can become opaque to even the most attentive parent. Developing trust, fostering open communication, and demonstrating a genuine interest in the child's experiences go a long way in bridging this gap. Parental monitoring should never feel like an act of control or suspicion, but rather an exercise in caring, guidance, and partnership. When children understand that their parents' interest stems from love and a desire for their well-being, they are more likely to embrace that support and grow into well-rounded, confident individuals who can navigate the complexities of life both in and out of school. In the village of Mariela, nestled between the sun-scorched savanna and the whispers of the baobab trees, schools were not just buildings but bustling hubs of life, brimming with lessons, tales, and the echoes of ancient drumbeats. Children learned more than letters and numbers there. They learned the art of storytelling, the weight of tradition, and the silent lessons carried by the wind through open windows. Amelie, a mother whose eyes shone like the full moon above the great river, was known for her wisdom and her unwavering watchfulness over her only son, Juma. She understood that the schools of Mariela, with their mixture of modern teachings and elders' folktales, were places of boundless potential, but also places where ideas, both bright and shadowed, took root. One evening, after a day when the sky had glowed red and orange before settling into deep indigo, Amelie sat with Juma under the ancient baobab. The wind stirred gently, carrying the sounds of children laughing and elders' deep, rhythmic conversations. Juma spoke excitedly about his lessons, his friends, and the tales shared by his teacher, Mr. Tamba, a man known for weaving stories that both inspired and provoked questions. "Today, Mr. Tamba told us about the lion who lost his roar," Juma said, his eyes bright with curiosity. "He said it was a lesson about finding your voice, even when it seems gone. But some said the lion should never have roared at all, that it brought nothing but trouble to his pride." Amelie listened, nodding as the evening breeze caressed her face. In the village, stories were more than mere tales. They were lessons wrapped in metaphor, a way of life. But she sensed that sometimes, even in their richness, stories could hold layers that sowed doubt or misdirection. "My son," she said, her voice soft but firm, "did Mr. Tamba tell you why the lion lost his roar?" Juma paused, thoughtful. "He said it was because the lion spoke too freely, and his voice was taken by the spirits of the night, who only return what they deem wisely used." Amelie's heart stirred. The tale, familiar in its essence, seemed to carry a new shadow. She understood that the world of learning, as vibrant as it was, could shift perspectives, could plant seeds that needed careful tending. The stories told at school had a power of their own, shaping young minds in ways not always foreseen. She reached for Juma's hand and smiled, the warmth of the day still in her palm. "You see, the lion's roar was not just lost to teach him silence, but to show him when to use his voice for the good of the pride, not just for his own. When you learn a story, remember it with your heart as well as your ears. There is more to understand than just the words spoken." The next day, Amelie decided to visit the school, not to confront or challenge, but to see how the world of learning intertwined with the teachings of their home. She watched as children ran barefoot, their laughter lifting like birds in the morning air. Mr. Tamba stood in the center, his voice commanding but kind, as he recited tales that carried lessons of bravery, loyalty, and cunning. During the lesson, Amelie noticed something, a subtle shift in the way some children whispered, a glint in their eyes when certain stories of power and defiance were told. The stories, as ancient as the roots of the baobab, were not changing, but the interpretations were. Children, eager to explore and test boundaries, sometimes saw rebellion as the hero's true path, misunderstanding the balance between wisdom and willfulness. After the lesson, Mr. Tamba approached Amelie, recognizing her keen watch. "Amelie, you honor us with your presence. Have you come to share a story or seek one?" Amelie smiled, nodding respectfully. "I have come to listen, to see what seeds are planted in our young ones' hearts. For as they grow, they will carry these tales, shaping them into paths they will walk." Mr. Tamba's expression softened, understanding her unspoken concern. "It is true, words carry power. I choose stories to ignite thought, but it is at home where they are truly watered and tended." In that moment, Amelie knew that while schools taught lessons that could shape, inspire, or challenge, it was at home, beneath the wide open sky of Mariela, that she and Juma could sift through the meanings, gather the seeds of wisdom, and nurture them with stories of their own. The wind that carried voices to the village would always tell stories, but it was the ear that listened and the heart that interpreted that truly mattered. That night, as the fire crackled and Juma's voice drifted into dreams, Amelie whispered an old song, a tale of balance and courage, to guide him through the night. She knew that while schools might plant the seeds, parents held the watering can, ready to nurture the roots that would one day grow tall and strong. In the heart of the Mariela village, where the sun painted patterns on the earth and the wind carried stories from generation to generation, the schoolhouse stood as a symbol of both hope and caution. It was a place where knowledge mingled with tradition, where children's laughter and serious whispers formed an intricate dance that mirrored the rhythm of life itself. Nia, a weaver known for creating the most vibrant fabrics in the village, watched over her niece, Kofi, a bright boy with eyes as sharp as the tips of acacia thorns. Kofi adored the stories shared at school, especially those spun by the mysterious substitute teacher, Miss Ao, who had come from a neighboring village known for its tales of the unseen world. Her stories held a power different from those of Mr. Tamba. They wove together lessons with an edge of intrigue that left the children buzzing long after the sun dipped below the horizon. One afternoon, as the shadows of the baobab trees stretched lazily across the land, Kofi returned home with an excitement that set his voice racing. "Auntie Nia, today Miss Ao told us about the midnight gatherers, the ones who collect secrets whispered under the stars. She said they decide which ones to share and which ones to bury deep." Nia's fingers paused on the loom, the colorful thread suspended between her hands. The story of the midnight gatherers was an old one, shared only in whispers and known for sparking wonder and fear in equal measure. It was a tale that carried a warning. Not all knowledge needed to be pursued, some was best left untouched. "Did she tell you why the midnight gatherers take those secrets, Kofi?" Nia's voice was steady, but her heart watched carefully, as one does when balancing on the edge of a precipice. "She said they do it to keep the village safe from truths that can twist the mind and the heart," Kofi replied, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "But some of us wondered if they also keep knowledge for themselves, for power." Nia took a deep breath, the weight of generations resting on her chest. It was one thing for a child to learn of bravery and kindness. It was another to be stirred with ideas that flirted with distrust and rebellion. The midnight gatherers, in their dual role of protectors and enforcers, had always symbolized the delicate line between what was known and what was controlled. That evening, as the sun bled out into a rich purple sky, Nia sat with Kofi around a small fire, the flames flickering like restless spirits. She picked up her drum, its hide warm under her hands, and played a steady rhythm that brought peace to the space between them. "Kofi," she said after a moment, "there is a story about a boy, much like you, who sought to learn from the midnight gatherers. He thought that to know everything would make him powerful, wiser than even the elders." Kofi leaned forward, eyes wide, caught in the web of her words. The boy waited until the moon was full, the night heavy with the scent of wildflowers and secrets. He called out to the midnight gatherers, and they came, shadows wrapped in silence. They listened to his desire, and one spoke, "If you take our knowledge, you take the weight of it too. Not all burdens are worth bearing." But the boy, proud and determined, insisted. Nia's hands paused on the drum, letting the silence breathe before continuing. They shared their secrets with him, tales of hidden fears, whispered betrayals, truths that unraveled friendships. And soon, what was once a mind filled with laughter and light became tangled with doubt and suspicion. The boy found himself unable to trust, not his family, not his friends, and least of all himself. His nights were filled with a rustling of leaves that whispered doubts, and the village became a place he watched with wary eyes. Kofi swallowed, the warmth of the fire now feeling distant. "What happened to him, Auntie?" "He learned that some stories must be known, but others must be balanced with the wisdom of the heart and the home," she said, reaching out to touch his shoulder. "And he learned that to truly grow, he needed to share his fears, to seek the guidance of those who loved him and could help him understand what he could not alone." The next day, when Kofi returned to the school, Miss Ao's stories had a different taste, one that mixed curiosity with caution. He found himself asking more questions, not just taking the tales at face value. The other children noticed too. Their chatter grew thoughtful, their eyes searching beyond the surface of words. And so, in the village of Mariela, stories continued to weave their way through lessons and homes. But with parents like Nia, children learned that it was not enough to know. They had to learn how to listen, question, and share. For in the dances of shadows and whispers, it was the steady drumbeat of home that anchored them, guiding their steps with wisdom and love. In Mariela, life moved to the pulse of the river, the great Hamba, which flowed with stories of its own. It was said that those who listened carefully to the song of the water could hear the laughter of children and the whispered lessons of ancestors. The village children would often gather at the river's edge after school, splashing and playing, their voices mingling with the babble of the current. Yet, hidden in the playful shouts were questions that took root, ones that only the river seemed to truly understand. Among these children was Penda, known for the quickness of his smile and the deep well of questions in his heart. He was raised by his grandmother, Mama Jalea, who had a voice like the low hum of evening crickets and eyes that had seen many moons rise and fall. Mama Jalea knew the importance of stories told at school, but she also knew that stories carried by the voices of others could flow like the river, sometimes nurturing, sometimes fierce. One afternoon, Penda came running home, feet dusted with the red earth, eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and unease. "Grandmother, today we learned of the river spirits who guard secrets beneath the water. Mr. Obasai told us that they hold the truths of our past, things hidden even from our elders." Mama Jalea paused from her weaving, the intricate patterns echoing the story she'd learned at the river's edge as a girl. "And what do these spirits say, Penda? What truths do they keep from us?" Penda shifted, his excitement dampened by a sudden seriousness. "Mr. Obasai said that sometimes they reveal the past to those brave enough to dive deep, but that many who search come back changed. Some say they speak of forgotten wrongs and lost promises." Mama Jalea's gaze softened as she looked at her grandson, his brows knitted with thought. "The river's song is as old as time itself, my child. It sings of what was, what is, and what may come. But not all songs are meant to be sung aloud." That evening, as the sky turned a deep blue and the first stars began to prick the velvet darkness, Mama Jalea took Penda to the river. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and night-blooming flowers. She knelt beside the water and let her fingers dip in, creating ripples that stretched and disappeared. "Listen, Penda," she whispered. "Do you hear the river's song?" Penda closed his eyes and listened, the steady flow blending with the quiet croaks of frogs and the soft rustle of leaves. At first, it was only noise, a collection of sounds without meaning. But as he focused, he began to sense something deeper, a rhythm, a story wrapped in the current. It spoke of unity and loss, of bravery and regret, all woven into a tune that shifted with each heartbeat. "The spirits Mr. Obasai spoke of, they do hold truths, yes," Mama Jalea said, her voice almost a part of the river's music. "But their truths are not always the ones we need to know. Some truths can stir fear or anger, turning the heart like turbulent water. This is why we must be careful which stories we choose to hold close." Penda opened his eyes, the river's song still echoing in his ears. "But how do we know which stories to seek and which to leave?" Mama Jalea smiled, the lines on her face deepening like the well-worn paths in the village. "We listen with more than just our ears, child. We listen with our hearts and with the wisdom of those who came before us. The river may sing, but it is the voices at home, those that know us and love us, that help us understand what we hear." The next day at school, when Mr. Obasai told more tales of the river spirits and their hidden knowledge, Penda felt a new kind of strength. He listened, not just with eagerness but with discernment, letting the stories wash over him without pulling him under. He noticed others, too, seemed to carry questions they did not dare ask aloud. During a break, he shared his thoughts with his friend, Ao, who nodded solemnly and spoke of his own grandmother's warnings about seeking too much too quickly. As the days passed, the children began to speak more openly, sharing not just what they heard at school but what they learned at home by the fireside or whispered between the tall grasses where crickets sang. The lessons of the river spirits became part of a larger tapestry, woven with threads of caution, wisdom, and the stories that parents and grandparents shared under the warm, knowing gaze of the moon. Mama Jalea watched her grandson with pride. She knew that while school filled his mind with tales and lessons, it was the songs of the river and the voices of home that would guide his heart. In Mariela, the river would always sing, but it was the echoes of love and wisdom that would keep its children safe as they learned when to dive deep and when to let the current carry them gently forward. In the village of Mariela, drums were more than instruments, they were the lifeblood of stories, carrying voices that bridged generations. The great drum, Mkanda, sat in the center of the village square, carved with symbols of ancestors and spirits, its deep, resonant sound known to stir hearts and awaken memories. Every important story was told with its beat, from tales of triumph to those of lessons learned through silence and patience. Mosi, a boy with a spirit as restless as the wind, often found himself drawn to the drum's call. His father, Tund, was one of the village drummers, a man with hands that moved like lightning across the skin of Mkanda, creating rhythms that made the elders nod in approval and children's feet move without thinking. But Mosi longed for more than just the dance. He wanted to understand the stories hidden within each beat. One evening, after school, Mosi approached his father as the sun cast a golden glow across the village. "Baba, today at school, Miss Saad told us about the drums of the northern tribes that speak secrets only the brave understand. Do our drums hold secrets too?" Tund paused, wiping sweat from his brow, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "The drum speaks many things, Mosi, but not all who hear understand. Some beats carry joy, others warn of danger, and some tell stories of power that should not be taken lightly." Mosi's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Can you teach me the secrets, Baba? Can I learn what Nkanda truly says?" Tun's lips pressed into a thin line, a shadow of worry crossing his face. He knew the tales that stirred in school, tales that made children's eyes wide with wonder and hearts eager for more than they could carry. The drums had been the soul of Mariela for generations, teaching not just strength but also restraint. "Before you can learn the secrets, my son, you must learn to listen, not just with your ears, but with your spirit." He picked up 2 thin, carved drumsticks and handed one to Mosi. "Come, let me tell you a story not through words, but through the rhythm." As they sat by Mkanda, Tun's hands began to move, producing a beat that was both steady and unpredictable, like rain that starts as a drizzle and turns into a storm. The sound drew the attention of those nearby. Even the elders leaned in, recognizing the song of the ancients, a tale of a warrior who lost his path in pursuit of forbidden power. Mosi struck the drum hesitantly, trying to match his father's rhythm. His heartbeat quickened, feeling the energy pulse through him, telling of the warrior's rise, his challenge to the village spirits, and the chaos that followed. The story ended with a deep, lingering beat that seemed to resonate in the silence left behind. "That is the story of Isalu, the warrior who thought he could command the spirits with the drum's power alone," Tun said, his voice low. "He learned too late that to seek the drum's secrets without wisdom is to invite the storm." Mosi sat in silence, the echo of the drum's final beat settling in his bones. He understood now that the stories carried in their village, whether spoken in school or told through Mkanda, were more than just tales. They were warnings wrapped in the warmth of tradition, reminders that knowledge could be a double-edged spear. The next day, when Mosi returned to school, Miss Sada's stories felt different. The tale of the northern drums that whispered secrets to warriors no longer seemed like an invitation, but a challenge to approach learning with humility. He shared his experience with the drum and what his father taught him with his classmates during the midday rest. "Not all stories are meant to be shouted into the wind," Mosi said, looking out at his friends gathered in the shade of the acacia trees. "Some must be listened to, felt in the chest and carried gently, like a song that guides rather than commands." A few children, including his friend Ife, nodded thoughtfully. Ife's mother was a storyteller, one who often said that a good tale was like water. It could quench thirst or drown if not understood. As weeks passed, the village school continued to echo with new stories, lessons, and ideas. Yet, among the children, a new tradition began. Before they spoke of tales that carried weight, they would tap out a small rhythm on their wooden desks, a reminder of Mkanda's story and the lesson of Isalu. It was their way of grounding themselves, of remembering that to know was one thing, but to understand was another. Tund watched from afar, pride swelling in his chest as he saw Mosi teaching younger children the small rhythm. He knew that in the land of Mariela, where the river sang and the baobab whispered, it was the steady voice of the drum that would guide them, echoing the wisdom of the past and promising safe passage into the future. The village of Mariela held many secrets, whispered among the leaves of the baobab trees and carried on the breath of the warm evening wind. But none were as intriguing as the tale of the forgotten path. The story was seldom told aloud, except by the oldest among them who remembered when the path was more than just a memory wrapped in mystery. Kito, a boy whose quiet nature hid a mind alive with curiosity, had grown up hearing hints about the forgotten path from the elders. It was said to be a trail leading deep into the heart of the ancient forest, where the spirits of the ancestors watched and listened. But in school, tales like these were rarely spoken of. The lessons there were about the physical world, numbers and letters, crops and tools, leaving stories of the unseen to linger like smoke at the edges of the children's minds. One day, while listening to his teacher, Mr. Jengo, talk about the history of their ancestors' migrations, Kito's thoughts drifted. The idea of paths that led beyond what was known seemed more vivid than the chalk marks on the board. After class, he approached Mr. Jengo, eyes filled with a question that had danced on his tongue for days. "Sir, what of the path that is said to be forgotten?" Kito asked hesitantly. Mr. Jengo's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and caution. He glanced at the window, where the sun cast patterns of light and shadow on the ground. Quito, some paths are left forgotten for a reason. The forest holds stories that are best whispered only in the heart, he said, his voice low and deliberate. The response only stoked the fire of Quito's curiosity. That evening, he found himself at the edge of the village, where the grass grew tall and the trees gathered like watchful elders. The air was thick with the scent of wood and earth. Just as he was about to step further, a voice called out, "Seeking what you do not understand, Quito?" It was Bibi Nala, an elder with hair as white as the moon and eyes that seemed to hold the reflections of every star. "I only wish to know, Bibi. They say the path hides stories of our ancestors, stories that could teach us," Quito said, his voice barely above a whisper. Bibi Nala's laughter was soft, like leaves rustling. "Ah, the young hunger for knowledge, even when it bites back. Let me tell you a tale." They sat beneath the canopy, and the sounds of the village dimmed as if the world itself leaned in to listen. Bibi Nala's voice was like the wind's whisper, weaving a story that wrapped around Quito like the branches above. Long ago, before the village was named Mariela, there were those who walked the path in search of wisdom. The forest was alive with the voices of ancestors, spirits who held the knowledge of both light and shadow. They guided the first walkers, teaching them the balance of power and humility. But one man, called F, wanted more than guidance. He sought dominion. He believed that if he could command the spirits, he would be greater than any chief or elder. He followed the path deep into the forest and demanded the spirits' secrets. But instead of power, he found only echoes that turned on him, voices that reminded him that wisdom without respect was a hollow gift. Quito's breath caught in his chest. The weight of the story pressed against his heart, making him realize that some knowledge could twist like a thorn vine. What happened to him, Bibi? F was never the same when he returned. He spoke in riddles and warned others away from the path, eyes haunted by what he had found. The village learned that the path was not forbidden by any human hand, but by the spirit's silent will. The following day, Quito walked to school with new eyes. Mr. Django's lesson seemed different now, the stories of their ancestors not just history but pieces of a greater song that hummed beneath the surface of every story told. When he shared what he had learned with his friends, their eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. They realized that school was not just for learning what was safe and known. It was a place where questions could be born, even if some remained unanswered. The children began to ask their elders more about the old stories. Sometimes they were met with knowing silence, and other times with small tales that hinted at what lay beyond their understanding. But always, they were reminded of the wisdom of listening and respecting the boundaries set by those who came before them. And so in Mariela, the story of the forgotten path became part of their education, not taught within the walls of the school, but through the whispers shared under the trees, in the glow of firelight, and in the rhythmic beat of their hearts when they stood at the edge of the forest. Quito learned that seeking was not wrong, but seeking with respect was the path that kept the heart steady and the village safe. In the heart of Mariela, beneath the spreading limbs of the great baobab, there was a place called the Elders' Circle. It was where the old ones, whose hands were marked by years of harvest and whose eyes reflected the passing of countless seasons, gathered to share wisdom. The children were often drawn to its edges, peeking from behind the tall grasses, their laughter hushed by the gravity of the stories told there. Among these children was Amani, a girl known for her quick feet and quicker mind. Her curiosity was like a spark that never dimmed, even when the elders spoke of things wrapped in caution. One day, word spread that the circle would convene to tell a story not shared for many moons, a tale of the wind singers. These were spirits that could speak truths into the air, weaving their voices into the very breeze that touched the village. Amani's heart leapt at the chance to hear it, to finally understand what made the adults nod knowingly whenever the wind changed and carried with it a different scent or sound. After school, Amani ran home, her steps light and quick as a bird's flight. She found her grandmother, Jata, sitting outside their hut, fingers braiding a basket with reeds that swayed in the late afternoon sun. "Grandmother, may I go to the Elders' Circle tonight? They're speaking of the wind singers." Amani's voice was a mix of excitement and plea. Jata's hands paused, the reeds held between her strong, aged fingers. She looked at Amani with a gaze both stern and soft, as if seeing the child and the woman she would become. "The wind singers, child, are not just stories for the ears. They are whispers that touch the soul. If you go, remember that listening is not just with the head but with the heart as well." That evening, as the sky wore its deepest blue and stars blinked awake, Amani sat at the edge of the circle. The fire in the center crackled, its light dancing on the faces of the elders. When the oldest among them, Elder Udo, stood up, a hush fell over the gathering. His voice, though raspy with age, carried like the steady thrum of the river. Listen well, for the tale of the wind singers is not just a story, it is a teaching, passed down from the days when our ancestors first walked this land. Elder Udo began. Long ago, when Mariela was young and the river Hamba ran wild and free, there were those who spoke not with words but with the wind. They were neither seen nor touched, but their voices could guide or mislead, depending on the heart that listened. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks upward, and the children held their breath, hanging on every word. There was once a boy, Ikenna, who longed to hear the wind singers. He was clever and bold, but his spirit was restless, seeking to know what others dared not. One night, when the winds were fierce and the village shuttered their homes, Ikenna stood at the river's edge and called to the spirits. "Speak to me, wind singers. I wish to know the truths you guard." Elder Udo's eyes flicked to Amani, who shivered despite the warmth of the fire. The wind replied, not with gentle whispers but with a voice like thunder. "We speak only to those who listen beyond themselves, who seek not for power but for understanding." But Ikenna's heart was too full of his own desires, and so, he heard not the guidance but only the echoes of his own voice. When he returned to the village, he carried with him not wisdom, but a storm within, one that twisted his thoughts and distanced him from those he loved. Elder Udo's voice softened as he concluded, "The wind singers teach us that knowledge comes at a price. It is only when sought with humility and shared purpose that it becomes a gift and not a burden." Amani's mind raced with the story's meaning, the weight of it settling like the cool breeze that followed the night. She looked at the elders, their faces illuminated by the fire's glow, and felt the pulse of the lesson within her. The wind that touched her cheek now felt different, as if it too had listened to the story and carried its own reply. The next day, as she walked to school with her friend Kwame, Amani shared what she had heard. "The wind speaks, Kwame, but only to those who listen with their hearts," she said, repeating Elder Udo's words with wonder. Kwame grinned but nodded, the seriousness in his eyes matching her own. "Then we must learn to listen, not just to the wind, but to each other and to those who have listened before us." And so, the tale of the wind singers became more than just a story told by the fire. It moved through the children of Mariela, carried in whispers and shared looks, a reminder that learning was not just about knowing, but about feeling, understanding, and carrying that knowledge with respect. The wind that passed through the village, bending grass and rustling leaves, now seemed to speak to those ready to listen, teaching them to seek answers not just in the stories told, but in the silences between them. As the sun rose over Mariela, casting its golden warmth over the village, the great baobab stood watch, silent and ancient. Its roots were said to hold the memories of generations, stories etched into the earth by the footsteps of the people who gathered beneath it. This morning was different, though. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. The children were to bring what they had learned from the elders and their schooling to share beneath the old tree, weaving the wisdom of both worlds together. Amani awoke early, her heart pounding with excitement. She knew today was special, not just for herself but for everyone who listened to the stories and lessons passed down. She met her friends, Kwame and Penda, on the way to the baobab, their laughter mingling with the bird calls as they ran through the tall grasses. When they arrived, the village was already gathering. Elders sat on woven mats, their faces creased with the lines of many stories. Parents stood behind, hands resting on their children's shoulders, and the younger ones jostled for a place near the front. The sky was clear, and a soft breeze whispered through the leaves, as if the baobab itself leaned in to listen. Elder Udo stood and raised his hand. "Today, we come not to speak, but to listen. Our children will tell us what they have learned, not just with their minds, but with their hearts." Amani stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the story she had heard from her grandmother, from the elders, and even from the quiet conversations shared at school. "I have learned," she began, her voice steadying, "that stories are not just words. They are lessons, songs, and warnings. The wind singers taught me that listening must come before speaking, and that understanding is deeper than knowing." The elders nodded, their eyes gleaming with approval. Kwame stepped forward next, sharing how the tale of the drum had taught him that balance was as important as courage. "Without wisdom, even the strongest sound can turn to noise," he said, repeating the words of his father. Then Penda spoke, recalling the river spirits and how their whispers carried both beauty and caution. "It is not enough to seek truth. We must be ready to hold it with care," he said, looking at the elders, who exchanged glances filled with pride. The children's voices mingled, each telling their own stories, weaving their learnings together like a tapestry. The baobab seemed to sigh with satisfaction, its leaves rustling as the wind joined the chorus, carrying their words up and out, beyond the village and into the unknown. When the last child spoke, Elder Udo rose again. "You have shown us that learning is not just found in one place. It is in the stories of the fire, the lessons of the school, the whispers of the forest, and the voices of those who came before us. You have taken these lessons and made them your own, as it should be." Mama Jalea stepped forward, clapping her hands once, a signal that brought the drummers to life. Tun's hands flew across Mkanda, sending a deep, rhythmic song into the air. The children laughed and clapped, their feet moving to the beat, dancing the stories into the ground, where they would stay, growing like roots beneath the baobab. Amani felt a sense of peace wash over her, knowing that the stories she carried were not just tales but gifts, pieces of her that would guide her and those around her. The lessons she had learned, from the wind singers to the drum's warning, would not only live within her but within the village, held and shared, like the roots of the baobab that cradled them all. As the drums played and the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that embraced the village, the elders spoke in quiet tones to one another. They knew that Mariela's future was safe, cradled in the hands of a generation that understood that learning was not just absorbing, but living, questioning, and sharing. And so, beneath the baobab, with its roots reaching deep and branches stretching to the sky, Mariela's stories, old and new, intertwined in harmony. The village breathed as one, knowing that the wisdom of the past and the curiosity of the present would guide them, like the steady song of the river, into whatever the future might bring.